Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Lewis. I am the Vice President of Government Relations for CNIC and want to thank you for joining us for this splendid plenary session. I think we're going to have a robust discussion, and I'm humbled to be with these extraordinary leaders doing great work around bringing us broadband, not just locally, but statewide and nationally. And I think, when we really think about the changes in the internet from the commercialization of the internet early on to where we're at today, we have a long way to still go to ensure that everyone has access and connectivity at home, at school, and where they work. And so we're going to start with talking about what's been going on and bringing you some community perspective around all this new funding that's come in, because again, the pandemic really opened the eyes for many policymakers around the importance of broadband and how it is really a critical component of our everyday lives. And so to start, all the bios for all of our speakers are in your app. So if you want to check them out, please feel free to do there. And I am not going to introduce them. I am going to let them introduce themselves to talk about the work they're doing and why they're here and part of this panel and kind of sharing with you some of this perspective in the community. And I'm going to start with Connie Stewart.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Hi, I'm Connie Stewart, Executive Director of Initiatives for Cal Poly Humboldt. Thank you all for coming today. We're going to try to keep our opening remarks to 3 minutes so we have more time to talk. But since I last was at the CNIC conference, and thank you so much for inviting me, and this has sort of become our roadshow group. We keep each other updated, so it's fun to be around friends again. The money really is going to help solve the lack of reliable backhaul. With the middle mile, that's the really good news, is that local existing companies can expand their networks and make their programs more viable. And we're also trying very hard to bring in other providers and create some robust competition so folks have choices. But we still really struggle with permitting. So the last time I was here, I spoke about a project that I consider my Don Quixote project, which is Highway 299. And it's about a 200-mile project, middle mile project I've been working on since 2009. And I'm pleased to say that it's 63% done. And 20% of the fiber is pulled. So now it's, okay, now how do I get last mile from that project? Excuse me. Permitting is still a major challenge because we have so much federal and state land. So getting people to agree to be the lead agency has been a struggle. We have 3 last mile projects that don't have a lead agency on permitting right now. So that means you're sitting around waiting till you beg one of the agencies to step up to the plate. If we had centralized permitting at the state level and at the federal level, life would be so much easier to get this money out right now. We're in the middle of doing surveying, like spotted owl surveying and all sorts of surveying. And that requires about a year to do. You have to do it the year before in order to start building the next year. Right-of-way issues, that community that doesn't want you digging there can lead to having inequities in plans. Inevitably, it's ironic that minority communities and lower income communities sometimes have the hardest right-of-way challenges because you might have an agency that just doesn't want you to dig near there, making it more expensive to serve those areas. So we're still dealing with those challenges. As part of the 299 project, we got fiber to tribes for the life of that project. And so now those tribes are having fun trying to figure out how to avoid cultural issues as they figure out how to plot and archaeological issues as well. And so some of those projects, they're perilous still. So we the good news is we're taking care of the backhaul, But I have a nickname, which is Sherpa of the Redwoods, because I spend most of my time now actually meeting companies and taking them out to sites. And of course, they look at big clusters of homes that are already served and go, can I go there? And I go, no, 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 no. You have to come over here where there's no providers and we really need you. And so, it's a struggle. My biggest fear is we're going to build this all out and we're still not going to have the O&M in order to make these people stay in these communities and stay in service. And one of the biggest struggles we're going to have is the Affordable Connectivity Program, which really did help minorities and low-income people be part of this market, create operation and maintenance money for these companies in some remote areas. And if we don't we have to stop doing test programs and just start committing to supporting in order to get rid of the inequities in the region. So those are the things that I spend my days thinking about now as we struggle on the map to make sure that no one gets left behind.
Right. Now we'll hear from Matt to talk a little bit about the tribal perspective. And I think Connie introduced that nicely.
Sure. So Matthew Rantanen, Vice President of Tribal Broadband at Golden State Net. Also 23 years with the Southern California Tribal Chairman's Association building networks and working through policy problems at the federal level and the state level. Working with the National Congress of American Indians for the last decade on tech and telecom policy as well. So we're in a very unique time at sort of, I think we're going to call it the downhill slide of a very unique time where we saw a bunch of money come out. The last of that money is getting deployed or going to be deployed. And we have, California specific, we have 109 federally recognized tribes that, stand to make a difference for their future communications challenges. And we have, a network that's being constructed, the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative with the California Department of Technology that is, roughly an attempted 10,000 miles of new or newly acquired build that's going to get closer to rural, closer to unserved and underserved folks. And, it's an ambitious project. It's not enough money. It's not enough network to serve California. California is massive. Back in 2016, we did a study and we found that we're 8,000 missing middle miles to 320 reservations in the lower 48 states. So you can imagine California's got a big chunk of that with 109 tribes. They had 1,800 of those missing miles. California's middle mile network is erasing, hopefully, almost a half of those missing miles for tribes, but not solving it for the other half yet. So we are working very thoroughly with each of the tribes to better understand their needs, to better understand their desires for communication, to collaborate with them in creativity of solution, to be able to get their connectivity to this middle mile network, to be able to support the plans that they have for their future. And some of you yesterday saw that I run tribal broadband boot camps and received an award for that yesterday, which was very awesome. And we are trying to share as much information with tribes about these types of things as possible, getting tribes together to work together throughout the state of California and the country to be able to create a stronger workforce in that space. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So now we've heard a little bit about what's going on in rural California, tribal lands, and now I'm going to turn it over to Tony Naughtin to spend a little time talking about the urban challenges in California. Tony?
There we go. Okay. Tony Naughtin, about 4 decades of experience in my career in network development and communications and operations, first as a lawyer, mostly as an operating executive, served for over 2 years as the chief operating officer of Golden State Net, and that was a great honor. It's obviously a very, very important program to the state. The state, of course, is probably the most challenging in this regard with regard to the geography, topology, many unserved areas. A lot of things went into strategic planning, and are still, of course, very much going into tactical execution of the program. It's, I think, fair to say it's out of the design stage now, thanks to the good work my colleague Erik has provided, and really into the development stage in a very early sense. There's a long way to go. There are many challenges. The rewards will make it all worth it. I think, of course, a theme or a couple of themes that the Golden State Net team has heard me say, probably got tired of hearing me say over the last 2 years, the importance of trust and the importance of trusting those who have operating experience doing these meeting these challenges and developing these networks. So great to be here on this panel with my colleagues, and we look forward to your questions after we're done.
Thanks, Tony. So now we've talked a little bit about kind of what California's landscape is like, and we all know those challenges because you guys are all doing the work on the ground day to day. I think I want to take us a little bit higher level and then turn to Rachelle a little bit to share what's going on at the federal level. I think a lot of us hear things, and so I'm going to turn to our expert around federal perspective of what's happening right now.
Morning, everybody. Rachelle Chong, former FCC commissioner, former PUC commissioner, and most recently just stepped off as chairwoman of Shelby for a couple of years, just left the board, but I was involved with them for quite a while. And as a result, really following what's going on in the FCC, particularly involving schools and libraries and rural healthcare. So we're going to go on headline news is the way I'm going to do this, because I'll be available later for more info. But obviously there was the big U.S. Treasury Capital Projects Fund that came to California. We call it here SB 156 because that's the bill that allocated it. So the PUC has the FFA applications in, 484 of them, asking for more than twice than what is available, 2 billion available, and those applications asked for 4.6 billion. And we do know that the PUC is saying grants will come out roughly June-ish starting, and that each county, of course, has at least $50 million. Some have more, depending on how much unserved they've got. I've talked to PUC staff. They're trying to harmonize those applications with the pending PUC California Advanced Service Fund infrastructure applications. So there's been delays on the CASF funds. And of course, they now have a BEAD rulemaking going on, and that money came from the NTIA grant to California. That's going to be $1.86 billion in last mile grants. They believe the rules will come out this year, and hopefully applications will start coming in. PUC did submit their required volumes on time by end of last year, so everything is waiting for final NTIA approval. Okay, and then of course, CDT is working on the digital equity and adoption grants. They put in their plan on time at the end of last year, and we're waiting for NTIA to approve that. And if you have questions, Gladys is here from NTIA. Okay, Affordable Connectivity Plan and IIJA. There was a big tranche of money to help low-income people get internet during the pandemic. And of course, we all know that it has expired. And the last funding will be partial funding for the month of May. There are requirements on ISPs to transition those people. Make sure you are aware of those customer notices and that you comply with them if you have ACP folks. Now, what do we do without ACP? That's 22 million Americans thrown off their internet plan if they don't get ACP money. Well, of course, there are existing affordable plans that many internet service providers have, and they do have a duty to try to transition those folks. But what do we do for the future? There is some discussion in Washington right now about funding a ACP-like program in the future through perhaps spectrum auction proceeds. Right now, the FCC's spectrum authority is being re-upped in Congress, and that's one idea of how to fund this. The other idea is to put it somewhere in the general FCC Universal Service Fund program. But speaking of Universal Service Fund, it is under attack in a number of federal courts, saying that it is unconstitutional. It's been in 3 courts so far. Shelby is helping fight it, and we've had mixed results so far. And this is a really big problem. The other problem is the contribution methodology. the money that it collects from is shrinking because landline is reducing every day, and therefore we have to redo that formula. So sticking things in the Universal Service Fund like ACP, that fund is shrinking. This is a big problem. Okay, quickly, cybersecurity, just headline news. There's a new 200 million 3-year pilot program for schools and libraries to get funding for cybersecurity services and upgraded firewalls. Check it out. It's not enough money, but at least it's a start, and it showed great leadership by Chairman Rosenworcel. Hotspot funding for schools and libraries. Following the success of the Emergency Connectivity Fund during the pandemic, there is an effort to fund Wi-Fi hotspots permanently. You should be following that if you're a school and library that needs that. Wi-Fi and school buses, there's also an FCC notice saying that they are looking at funding of Wi-Fi connectivity on school buses for educational purposes. Unfortunately, some conservative forces are opposing that, saying a bus is not a classroom. I disagree. People do homework on their buses. So this is a big fight, but it's very important. Future spectrum policies being considered right now, and schools and libraries should make sure they're advocating for access to wireless spectrum that they may need. I'm done. Woo-hoo.
Definitely a lot going on at the federal level and a lot of implications for all of us here in California and beyond. And now, before we kind of talk locally, Sylvie, I'm hoping you can step in and talk a little bit about scenic and where we've all fit in this space around broadband equity and access.
Yes, be happy to. So I'm going to take a slightly different tact. I would say that I think everyone has heard here, all of this benefits the community, but perhaps people don't realize it takes a community to make this happen. And I think Scenic, because of its history, understands that best. They started over 20 years ago with this vision, focused on providing the bandwidth, the high-speed network necessary for research and education. But that grew, as many great ideas do. It expanded from the UC state colleges to the community colleges, K-12, and libraries, and also other institutions. Now we're seeing benefit from that from other community institutions that just hop off of that. They have the experience with the legislatures, both at the national and federal level. They also have the great relationships and knowledge with all the great service providers that enable that network bandwidth. And so I'm here to say we have the experience. And by the way, I'm Sylvie Cosgrove. I forgot to tell you who I am. I am very honored to be the Scenic Board Chair. I'm also very honored to have been asked to be a board member of Golden State Net. And in my day job, I get to be the Executive Director of IT Infrastructure at Stanford.
Thank you, Sylvie. Barbara, I'm hoping you can share what's going on locally here in California with the rest of the community.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Barbara Hayes. I'm the Chief Economic Development Officer at RCRC, the slide that you've been gazing at up there. And there's some fun facts about the organization. We do represent 40 of the state's 58 counties, those that are illuminated there on the slide. And in December of 2021, the RCRC board provided strategic direction to staff to establish Golden State Connect Authority. This is a joint powers authority under which all our broadband program of work falls. It is known there, as you see, as an affiliate entity of RCRC. So you can see at the bottom of the slide there, the 3 core principles or program of work, I should say, that the board has directed staff to pursue. And I want to focus just on the last one, if I could, given our time crunch, that's labeled there as an open access municipal broadband deployment. So we are, under the banner of Golden State Connect Authority, going to deploy, and by deploy, I mean finance, construct, own, operate, and maintain an open access last mile municipal fiber network. Probably the largest when we're all done. It'll likely be the largest in the US. We are starting that process now. And I mean, this audience knows what open access is. So we'll just flip that slide and that one as well. and go to the last, because I think it dovetails beautifully into what Rachelle just mentioned about SB 156 and the programs. We've really leaned in to use these programs for the benefit of the counties that we represent. So SB 156, for those that aren't aware, was passed in July of 2021 and allocated historic amounts of money, $6 billion, to broadband infrastructure in California. Really, really bold at that time. But as historic as the dollars that were allocated, it, for the very first time ever in statute, now allows counties to own, operate, and maintain broadband infrastructure. Thus, the creation of Golden State Connect Authority 5 months later. You can see there, the $6 billion was allocated across 4 program areas. The first was, of course, the middle mile open access that's been mentioned here on the panel earlier, that the state is taking on under the banner of Golden State Net. And by the way, we had the name first, Golden State Connect first before Golden State Net. So there's constant confusion in that realm, but we are the last mile provider. Golden State Net is the middle mile provider. I'm sorry, not provider, network administrator. The second program there that we tapped was the Local Agency Technical Assistance Program. This is the program that allowed for local governments and tribes, nonprofits to apply for up to $500,000 in the form of grants for pre-deployment projects. We assisted 39 applicants, 32 of our member counties and 7 cities and towns therein, with accessing those grants for purposes of network administration. We are providing under Golden State Connect Authority, the grant administration contract management for the network design that's occurring under those 39 grants. And we're doing so with the wonderful assistance of Tilson Technology and Utopia Fiber. The outcome of those grants will be roughly 40 miles of low-level construction-ready design for initial project areas across those jurisdictions. Those designs kind of helped us support 37 FFA applications. I'm standing up to see how it's listed there. It's listed as last mile. This is the $2 billion federal fund account, also known as FFA, last mile dollars. Golden State Connect Authority took those designs coming out of the LATA grants and applied for 37 grants under FFA for 30 of our counties and 7 of those cities and towns within. All in, we applied for a little over $800 million worth of grants to deploy this network. Our financial structure, again, really quickly, is that we will start each project area with the issuance of tax-exempt bonds because we're a municipal entity, a JPA. We have the ability to issue tax-exempt bonds. So we will issue tax-exempt bonds, and we will use the last program that you see on there that I haven't touched on is the Loan Loss Reserve Program. I'm in the process right now of writing 37 applications to the Loan Loss Reserve Program. These are dollars that are available to local governments, tribes, and nonprofits to securitize debt tools, debt issuances, whether it's bonds or loans, to hopefully gather a lower rate or garner a lower rate and allow us to do more with the money that we get from the bond issuance. So the base of our financial stack is that bond issuance, and then where there's a delta or difference between what's financeably supported by the project area and the total project cost, that's where we went in and grabbed FFA, or I shouldn't say grabbed, applied for FFA funding. We will do the same again when the BEAD money hits for farther out areas, those that get farther into the unserved areas. Our mission at Golden State Connect Authority is to ensure that every address that wants broadband, those that pick the house on the hill 5 miles from civilization and don't have utilities, that's a lifestyle choice. And we're not that worried about them. But our goal is to get broadband in one way or another with one provider or another, does not always have to be us, to every address across our 40 counties and ensure that they are connected. And this is just one more opportunity for that to occur.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. And I would be remiss if you opened us up into turning it over to Erik Hunsinger with Golden State Net. And I just want to think if you could talk a little bit about what middle mile role is. I know the feds have, put out dollars for middle mile networks as well. So maybe you could share a little bit about what folks are thinking of when they hear middle mile and what should they be thinking of?
Sure. Thank you. So Erik Hunsinger with Golden State Net. Golden State Net is part of Scenic. I want to point out that 2.5 years ago, when SB 156 was signed, Scenic initiated the program to become the third-party administrator, and Tony, my friend Tony Naughtin here, oversaw the building of the organization. So today we have a team of 20 people, largely commercial in perspective, with a heavy dose of engineering expertise founded out of Scenic. So we rely heavily on those resources to help advise the state of California in where, how, what, and so forth. So it's a big project, but what we've learned over the last couple of years is that not only is the state of California unique, as was described earlier, rural, urban, largely diverse, very wide set of communities. You have commercial entities that want to take advantage. You have community-based organizations, which I'm in a good position because half my board is here, and they are all broadband warriors, if you will. So we appreciate their lending their expertise on the important aspects of broadband in their communities. In addition to that, the network needs to serve sovereign nations. So that represents a very complex solution set for contractual relationships. Everyone wants to build and own something, but there is a strong consideration for commercial partnerships, and you can gain value if you structure those contracts in a way that the communities can take advantage of the infrastructure. But probably the biggest single thing that middle mile networks need to do is they need to create flexibility of interconnection. It may seem like a very finite or inane element of utilizing the network, but often engineering companies will come in and ask, what's the address? If you can set in policies and philosophies for mid-span interconnection, you do a couple of things. You ensure that you connect to every community within reach of the middle mile. And if you have a substantial footprint, that can be germane to communities across your state. But the second thing that it does, and it's not very obvious, is that it reduces the cost of construction of the last mile. They do not have to spend money getting to a particular address. They can leverage the connection right in front of their doorstep. That means more dollars in the last mile, more households connected, more neighbors lit up with fiber. So that's the first thing. It's very tough to get folks to change the paradigm of how things were done 20 years ago. Often engineers will come in and they'll want to say, we got to protect the network. The other thing is the assumption that should be for middle mile networks to cannibalize everything they have as quickly as possible. You make it available, you make it useful, and then you have the opportunity of creating sustainability for your network. So those are some of the things that we've been going through in our partnership with the state of California to help them optimize their investment in the network.
Thanks, Erik. So we covered a lot of ground there just in our opening comments. So thank you guys for all of that. As I think about it, right, we're spending a lot of money, we're building a lot of things. And the question always is, if you build it, will they come? So Connie, maybe this is a great place for you to kick off our conversation for a little bit of discussion of, how important is it that we have a really multi-pronged approach to closing the digital divide? I'm wondering if you could speak to that, and then anyone else feel free to chime in.
Yeah, such a big issue. There's so many people who are like, please build it out to X. And then you beg a provider to build it out to X and then no one signs up for service. And so you can only do that once before that provider doesn't listen to you ever again. So, that is one of the I mean, we robustly survey, we try to go door to door and explain the importance of it. And we truly believe that in order to have good broadband service, you have to have a competitive market. You have to have more than one provider, more than one option in a community. And that's really hard for providers to hear as well, too. But it's just the reality. You want co-opetition. And so, that's one of our struggles of trying to make sure that we get enough folks sign up, trying to make sure that they get the programs they need to do that. And as Rachelle said, having programs that can reduce the cost to those who need access but can't afford it is critical in that play. E-rate is critical in that play. Making sure that anchors buy service on those lines is critical. Like, for example, a lot of federal agencies have a locked up contract and they do not buy local service, right? Figuring out how to talk to those federal agencies and break those contracts so that they're on local service as opposed to getting service from out of the state or something like that. So literally, it's door to door begging people and saying to them, if we build it, you better buy it. Anybody else? Yeah.
So one element of the co-opetition piece is something that communities kind of struggle with is the concept of open access. So often funding comes in and solutions to manage and maintain the network are commercial partnerships. But it's really important in those contractual relationships that it's an open model and not a closed model. So you need to have, as Connie noted, co-opetition. You need to have partnerships and entities willing to serve a variety of constituents or last mile entities in their business model in order to create lower pricing. And the only way that's accomplished is if you have multiple users on the network. It's difficult because if you have some commercial entity investing their capital into a marketplace, it changes their business model and the dynamics, and it's tough to get them to want to allow any kind of competition in that space. So it's a consideration when any contract is written.
I have a slightly different perspective to share. We've heard a lot about how do they maintain and operate it? How do we get people, I use the term build and they will come. I think we've spent a lot of time about how to build it and how to make it available and how to fund it. But I think perhaps it's now also time to think about what's the why in it for the community. Why should I have broadband network? I think all of us in this room understand the advantages of it, but we shouldn't take for granted that people understand that. And I think real life examples, for example, education could be a piece into opportunities as part of the operating and maintenance of these networks that we build. I think showing community members, especially, for example, some of our elderly, it's difficult for them to get transport for medical care. What have we taught them, gave them the tools to be able to do telemedicine from their homes? There's another advantage. What if we were able to, I just had a conversation with someone earlier today about how can we reintroduce arts into K through 12? How could we introduce them, children, to artists all over the world? So I think the part of it now is for us to market and sell the why.
So with the tribal communities, I think what we have to look at is that there's a history of incumbents being incentivized to build out to these communities for decades, and it hasn't happened, right? So tribes are forced, again, to learn an industry that they should have access to services on and build their own communications support systems to be able to have their community be relevant in today's digital age. So we have, 109 tribes, the cross section of California. We have 574 in the nation. We have a focused look on, who has the capacity to manage an ISP, who has the capacity to stand up a utility and run this for their community. And then how do the ones that don't have those human resources, get communications, so you have the Hoopa Valley tribe who, was very successful in a grant from NTIA. They are a joint build partner with a CDT to build out the middle mile piece. They're going to be contracted to do operations and maintenance like we were talking about. So this tribe has stepped into the realm of telecommunications, has taken on that responsibility, and is learning that space to be able to support a region, not just a reservation, right? And then collaborate with other tribes in that space. But then you have small tribes that, this $6 billion investment may get closer to their community, but it doesn't build their last mile. They may not have enough people or expertise internally to pull that off. And then with the amount of dollars that are flowing, you have a bunch of sharks that jumped in the water that are trying to grab those dollars up and try to present an opportunity to work with them from the outside. So it's a very dangerous environment for some of those tribes that don't have the human capacity to be able to pull off something like this. So it is bridging the divide in a lot of cases, but it is making that divide farther for others. And we need to be supportive of all those different levels of communities, not just tribal, but communities that need that level of partnership and support.
Agreed, Matt. I just want to add that the point Sylvie first raised, sustainability of the network, both in the last mile and middle mile sense, the ongoing cost of operations and maintenance. There are many challenges the program of the middle mile faces, as well as the last mile in this development stage. But the biggest long-term challenge will clearly be the cost of operation and maintenance of this network. And of course, the network in the middle mile sense needs to be as self-sustaining as possible, economically speaking, and pay for its own cost of operation and maintenance. But that's going to be a very significant ongoing challenge in the years ahead. And I think there's going to have to be a creative approach. We don't yet know all the answers to those questions. And we're not assuming that appropriations or supplemental appropriations can be made to pay the cost of operation and maintenance in the long-term sense. It would be nice to have that safety net, but I don't think that should be assumed by anyone, which means the go-to-market challenges and the revenue generation aspects of this are something that will continually have to be focused on. Perhaps that's an obvious statement, but even now, deep in the development stage, we need to be thinking about that continually.
Just to follow on with that, I think that's one element of the open access is allowing commercial entities to leverage the infrastructure. If you have those commercial partnerships as a customer base, it represents a revenue source that has meaningful support of the overall infrastructure, and it makes it doesn't necessarily have to compete with the utilization by communities, right? It can dovetail those networks as well, and so having that approach is pretty important to the overall go-to-market program. And often middle mile networks and community networks will want to block that partnership based on what Matt shared, right? Folks come in and they want to leverage the infrastructure for themselves, and they want to take it over, and they want to own it, and they want to run it, and they want to keep it, and then it doesn't necessarily get used for the purposes intended. So it has to have strong oversight in order to meet the mission of the original intent.
So I just want to also throw in a huge fear, and I'm already starting to see this, right? Each one of these programs, especially all of the programs Rachelle talked about, have their own rule set. And so it's in some cases dangerous to get money for one program that doesn't want to work collaboratively with another program. So, for example, some of those tribes that got funding are very small. And if let's say they even get a take rate of 60%, they may only have, 300 or 400 customers in the end. That's not an O&M model that works, but they might be next door to a town that needs a provider. And if somehow the money is only allowed to be used on that tribal land, that is insane. It's insane, right? And so we as activists on the ground are trying to say that is an insane rule. Like, you can't spend all this money and then limit the number of customers this person has. We have to blow this up. We were on a call the other day and we got told, oh, our grant money, we can only advocate for CASF programs. We can't tell the community about BEADS programs with our money. We were like, that's insane. Like, so, we really need to figure out, as we talk about open access, how to get people to be less rigid about the rules of their individual grants, or we're really going to have an O&M problem.
Great. Thanks, Connie. Thinking about what a lot of things you guys have been saying, it leads me to think we've got a lot of different silos and a lot of different rules and things. And I'm hearing we're losing funding for many things around ACP and stuff. And so for this community, what advice do you have on ways they could engage and help support some of the issues and challenges that we're seeing in terms of continuing the momentum for funding for broadband? Right. Because I also worry, as an advocate, wearing my advocate hat, is that the pandemic is now, we're out of the pandemic and everyone's focus may shift to the next critical juncture. Right. But we just heard that O&M is going to be a major piece of the puzzle that we need to figure out. So what is it that maybe RENs, and we've got other states, other countries, what could we be collectively pushing forward to continue to ensure that broadband maintains its position that it has today, I think, of attention for policymakers and moving us forward?
I'll take a crack at that. So the first thing I wanted to say is broadband mapping. It's really important for anchor institutions to ensure that they are included on all the broadband maps that the states are preparing. If you're not on that map, you're not a location. If you're not a location, you don't get broadband service. Simple as that, right? So there's been a push by Shelby to make sure that we've talked to the state broadband offices to make sure that anchors are included. That is not a universal policy. Why is that important? There's still a lot of ongoing funding streams available. In California, for example, we have the trusty CASF fund that I established in 2006 at the PUC. Still has about 70 million a year, and it's less restricted than some of the other programs. For example, you can do wired or wireless in that program, whereas some of the new federal programs were more heavily biased towards fiber. So it does have some flexibility, particularly for very rural areas where fixed wireless might be more cost efficient. And then yesterday, there was a fantastic session that Robert C. and Gladys from NTIA put on, and there's 6 federal agencies that have broadband funding aspects. And if you missed that, there is a terrific group of PowerPoints that are going to be available on the Scenic site from this conference about those funding sources. So we have to remember that this is a long-term game we're playing. The money we got is definitely not enough. And we're going to have to continue to advocate for additional funding, both at the state and federal level, to finish off the job.
Turning the map.
Is it on? Oh, there we go. Thanks. Just wanted to step back a little bit and make a comment. And my Golden State Net colleagues probably have heard me say this 1,000 times, but I think it's useful along the way to have what I'll call a North Star theme. And the theme is the balance between idealism and pragmatism. And oftentimes, particularly in a program of this kind, we really need to favor the side of pragmatism, not to the exclusion of people or objectives, but in order to achieve the idealistic goals of this program, we cannot let the importance of practical approaches and getting real results be forgotten. So the needle sort of points to the side of pragmatism in order to achieve the idealistic and very important goals of this program, both in terms of middle mile development and, most importantly, service to last mile communities that have been underserved or unserved. Just a theme that was helpful to me in the 2 years or so that I was responsible for running Golden State Net. And it's a theme I think that will continue to pop its head up along the way here in this long journey.
So I think one of the things that it's a reality, an eventuality that's happening in policy as we educate policymakers to what communities' needs are, is that, you know, as Sylvie said, and you know, the lowest common denominators in small communities is education and health. And if we can't serve either of those two things to the household, then, you know, the community is failing in their communications aspects. So as people understand the value of communications and how it enables you to live a healthier life and get access to the resources that you need in your home, like the telephone did, you know, so long ago, and the electricity did so long ago, running water, et cetera. I mean, the broadband space is the tool that allows you to be a participant and a citizen in this country moving forward. And as the stretch between those that have it and those that don't gets further apart, you know, there are definitely some isolated incidents where, you know, they're completely left off the grid. So when politicians and lawmakers realize that, and communities and community leaders that are resistant realize that broadband changes their economic development opportunity, that, you know, a governor realizes that the more broadband that gets into the rural America, the more economic development, the more tax revenue, the more the state thrives. You know, it's all cyclical and tied together. It's one full circle, and everything comes back to supporting and growing the entire community of California, not just individual communities of California. And tribes have figured that out quite a while ago, and they're now figuring out how to step in that space and how to get their communities on the radar, and how to talk about their communities and talk about their communities' needs in a way that now is getting attention from policymakers. But you know, there are a lot of tribes, and geographically diverse and you know, solutions diverse, that need to be solved. So as we grow this and understand that, you know, the community thrives when the entire state thrives, everybody is supported. So it's, you know, it's kind of a holistic approach.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Kim, can I just add, I want to put on my economic development hat for just a moment. So my entire career up until a few years ago was exclusively business attraction, expansion, and retention. And broadband, as you can see, I'm kind of leading our broadband effort because of the economic development component and what it will mean for our rural county. So back to your question, Kim, originally was what can this group do to kind of keep it in the forefront, is if you live in a community that does not have broadband, and particularly if it's in rural California, demand it. Be vociferous in those demands, speak out, pay attention. Don't let people get away with not serving your address or your community, because it does impact the economic health of that community, in addition to education and health, as we've talked about. But companies are not going to locate in 2024 going forward. They're not going to expand operations in communities that do not have broadband. Every aspect of business today is tied to the internet. Number one. Number two, for those small businesses that are most prevalent in rural areas of the state, the internet provides access to the World Wide Web, the global marketplace. So that home-based business that sells at the farmer's market on Saturdays, then all of a sudden via internet has the opportunity to sell that good globally. Etsy is a wonderful thing. So, but they don't have that ability to grow, whether small or large, and ensure the health of that community. And as Matt mentioned, that economic benefit bubbles up to the state of California. So I would just say, and on behalf of my colleagues on our government affairs team, and I am not a member of that team, but be loud, be vociferous in your demands, in your needs for your community.
I was, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just going to add a quick example. Again, a different perspective. You know, Kim had said something about the concerns that, you know, what we learned and saw as far as benefits for those who had broadband from the pandemic. And now that the pandemic is over, that kind of excitement and need has died down. I observe something differently. I think it's changed forever how we're going to work. and live. So many, individuals are never going to necessarily go back into the office every day. The other opportunity it gave was for people who were working in high cost areas to move to low cost areas that are in rural spaces that don't necessarily have network. And so I think those individuals are also going to drive this economic growth and also the development of broadband in those communities that weren't there before.
Completely agree. I was also just going to say to the researchers out there, one of the other things I'm doing to help with these is writing in funding for dark fiber. So I'm actually a customer on some of the lines that are bought because I can afford to do that as part of my grant. And then when I go to talk to the company, I'm their customer saying, you mind taking care of that next block or that next block, or here's a gully that doesn't have service. I am giving you some revenue already. Can't you figure out how to get there too? So if you have the ability to do that in your research projects, I do work on seismic research. So I'm always asking them to extend to take care of that fissure I need to look at or whatever. And I just write in the money for that into my grants.
Thanks, Connie. I think I'm circling back to kind of like the pragmatism and this space is really an ecosystem, as Scenic has always described it. What is, and maybe I'll turn this to Barbara to kick us off on it. Like, what is the role of that partnership between what municipal government or tribal entities, Matt, are doing? Is there partnerships with our private sector partners who've been doing this? What could that look like? What should it look like? And how may that be different?
There's 100% opportunities for partnership, and we're not going to get this done if we don't work together. So it was mentioned some of the concerns about an open access model, about inviting providers on. So just to circle back to where I started, we and our Golden State Connect Authority will be constructing an open access last mile municipal network. We are going to invite providers onto that network to compete for customers. We are not a provider. We, as the municipal network administrator, will play that role and allow the provision of services to occur through private companies. And we invite all private providers to come onto our network. So there's that. I mean, it might be a fixed wireless provider who can hop onto the fiber network and be a provider in areas that were heretofore unavailable to that company. So there's that opportunity. Similarly, I will say that all of our designs under the LADA grants were done from the very beginning with the intent that we would connect with and support the state's open access middle mile network. And in all but 2 of those cases, we were successful. And in those 2 outstanding cases, it was because the state jiggered the middle mile around. Don't get me started on that. And it's still a moving target. But what has come out of the state middle mile is that in those 2 cases, we are going to need a middle mile partner. I know who the partners are in those areas, and we have written into the grant the cost to connect to those partners. But there's an opportunity as well, is as we grow our network, 30 counties and 7 cities to start, potentially, depending on how much of the grants we are awarded. But I think it'll be a good fair share. Our plan is to grow that and expand out. And one of the reasons that we're able to be successful is because we're doing it at scale and because we have the opportunity to kind of expand out into the more rural areas. We're going to need those private partners, those ISPs, to help us do that, no doubt, because the state doesn't go into the far reaches with middle mile access, but there is private fiber there. So those opportunities exist. I will say, just personally, for myself, I'm open to any and all partnership opportunities and would love to entertain any, because this is a huge lift and it's going to take all of us to get it done.
So with tribal space, tribal communities, tribal governments, et cetera, there are tribes that are taking this on themselves and, they're going to build it, right? But they still can't build it without external partners. They still can't build it without relationships with the state of California. They still can't build it without the relationship with GSN. with Scenic itself, prior to GSN, with, a number of regional partners, sometimes vendor partners and things like that. And then you have situations where a tribe will not be building it themselves, and they truly rely on an outside partner to serve their communications needs. They have a solution set that they've developed in their head about, like, this is what we need, and they need a partner that will listen to that plan and collaboratively work with them on developing that plan. And the advocacy that we've done for decades now with tribes is, if you're working with an external partner, build a mechanism where the asset that is developed on tribal land is owned by the tribe. So when your partner turns sour, and they all do, you can unplug your partner and plug in a new partner to your existing infrastructure that you built. If your federal dollars are building infrastructure on your land, but somebody else happens to be building that doesn't mean it's theirs. They're building it with your dollars. It should be your asset. So at the end of the day, maybe that's immediately, maybe that's a 3-year handover process, or even a 5-year handover process after some recoup of loss or revenue stream is generated. You have an asset that you can move forward with. And if it's built with fiber, it's somewhat future-proof compared to some of the other technologies that have to be recycled and advanced. And so, there are great opportunities for great partners out here. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of sharks. And so tribes need to do their due diligence, need to do their homework, need to reach out and talk to the CPUC, need to reach out and talk to other tribes, reach out and talk to folks about who's good and who's bad, because we've all had bad partners in our life. And you know how bad that can end up, right? And how many resources that can eat up, and how much time can that eat up and keep you from getting to your end goal. So, we're all helpful in this space. This entire community is supportive of everybody trying to do this. We want to support those good partners and create opportunities for more good partners.
Thanks, Matt. So I want to be cognizant of time, but I think we may have time for 1 or 2 audience questions in case somebody was brave enough to get in front of the mic and wants to ask our distinguished panel a question. And as we're waiting for that, I'll challenge my panel to think about what their closing remarks would be in that time. Ramesh?
Yes, thank you very much. Wonderful comments and observations. I had a question about the role of satellite in all of this.
Geosynchronous or low Earth orbit?
All kinds.
All of it? Geosynchronous download's really, really cool. Other than that, I don't know. I mean, I'm partial to in the satellite space, I'm partial to low Earth orbit, low latency, but it is what I call a pothole technology, right? So I've built a wonderful network that serves 17 tribes in Southern California called TDVNet, and it serves a multitude of households, and 1,000 other households have access to that should they choose to join it. But I can't get to that house around that corner unless I build another $250,000 tower that's running on solar power. I can't get to this one over here at the end of the street because there's a giant rock wall on the edge of this mountain that blocks my view of that house, and it's a wireless point-to-point technology. I can't afford to do that in this network. And I understand why telcos didn't build to certain regions. There's no return on investment. Well, one house is not going to return an investment enough for me to invest another $300,000-ish. It's a great pothole technology to serve those individual spots that we can't serve with a thing. I don't see a ubiquitous coverage of the globe in low Earth orbit satellite serving everybody at broadband speeds, especially by the time they get to that point. But it is a wonderful ancillary layer to be able to solve some of those disconnected needs.
I just wanted to quickly say that it's very important that any technology approach that we use is technology neutral. And I think satellite is the exact reason. There are some places in very remote or very rural areas where we're simply not going to get fiber there ever. So we've got to have alternatives, and that could be fixed wireless, it could be satellite. But we should never, ever have programs that say you only do X technology, because that's just stupid. End of rant.
Okay, next question.
Oh,
thank you.
Good morning. And first, I just want to say thank you for being here. Y'all are always one of my favorite panels at Scenic. You keep it real for us. So thank you. My question is probably mostly for Rachelle. When we're talking about, ACP, ECP, E-rate, USF, the funding that is ending and the funding that is under attack. How do we get this to MSM, social media, et cetera? How do we get the word out? I only saw one news story, and it was this week on a local station here about ACP ending. So how do we get the word out to, the rest of the nation? Because yeah, a lot of us, we advocate, but I know just, working from local government, there's always just that one person who's advocating, and how do we get everybody else involved? Thank you.
What a great question. Well, we're very worried about it. We haven't talked too much today about affordability, and everyone in this room knows how important affordable broadband is. We've talked mostly about infrastructure today. And you're exactly right. The termination of the ACP program could be disastrous for a number of extremely low income individuals in our country. So we do have a responsibility to get the word out. The FCC is not super good at that, I'll be honest. So we have to help them. And I would say California's done a great job, for example, getting the word out about the availability of ACP. We got some good grants. CETF and a number of community groups did a terrific job signing up, 3 million in California. Holy cow, 5.9. Thank you, Matt. So now when they fall off, what are we going to do? We have to get the word out that there are alternative affordable plans. Most ISPs do have affordable plans. They may not be $0, but they could be, 15 to 30, which is better than 60 on average here in California. So yeah, we do need to get the PR out. And I think all of us bear a responsibility for trying to do that, particularly local communities and tribes and those that work in those areas. And there's never any money for that, by the way. So we just have to do it because it's the right thing to do.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, so I agree. Great panel. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe this is a corollary to Ramesh's question about a pothole technology. But just as a little bit of background, I've been working with Steve Shackleton for about 5 years to try to get broadband up to Nature Bridge, which used to be the Yosemite Institute on the west slope of the Sierras. And of course, dealing with these multi-jurisdictional, federal, state, it's really been a slog. I think we're close, but it's taken us so long. There are other technologies that have sort of emerged in that time frame. We were originally looking at fixed wireless, and now I don't really want to tell Steve that I think I want to recommend low Earth orbit satellites and a CBRS network as a path forward. Could you sort of comment on that particular technology, CBRS, for distribution of the signal? Because it's one thing to get to the tower, right? It's another to get into people's homes. And we're looking in several use cases. We're deploying a test case with Andrew from ESNet out at Año Nuevo to support scientists. I'm just wondering where your head is with some of this technology.
For the crowd that doesn't know what CBRS is, do you want to just
so it's citizen band radio spectrum, and it was a spectrum that was historically reserved for CB radios, truckers, breaker 19 kind of stuff. It turns out that it's very good for 4G and 5G LTE deployments as long as you deconflict with the Navy. So if you're in an area where the Navy operates, that's the same frequency where they run their radars. So you have to say, oh, we're turning our cell phone.
Funny enough, even though you're on the western slope of the Sierra, the Navy actually does have operations that probably.
Oh yeah, believe me, I spent 20 years as a Navy scientist. We are everywhere.
Yeah. It's very surprising where the Navy is in the middle of the desert when there's no water.
Good place to shoot off rockets.
But it is, so CBRS is a great solution as long as you can operate where occasionally you may have to go down because of the usage of that spectrum space while there are operations in your area. It would be good to find out how frequent those operations are before I deploy a network that is going to be relied upon for perhaps 911 or some service that is really crucial. But we're seeing these deployments in Indian country already. We're seeing these deployments in rural that are very effective. Backhauling through a low Earth orbit satellite is definitely an option. I don't know if it's a long-term option or an affordable option based on the capacity or throughput your community is going to need as they evolve
Right,
on the
yeah.
internet. But for your application, it seems like it might be a viable solution, at least in the interim, before, we can convince California in the next 5 to 6 years to build out yet another tranche of middle mile that gets further along.
Okay, I think we're at close, if that's okay. We do have Meet the Speakers right after this. So if you'd like to engage in any more of this dialogue, please feel free to do so and stay after. So in that spirit of trying to stick to a schedule, just any burning close from any of you, 30 seconds, feel free. And if not, I'm totally fine with.
Always open to communication, reach out.
I was just going to say, we're only going to get this done through partnerships and through leveraging each other's resources and knowledge and expertise. So it's critical.
I always say the same thing at Scenic. Squeaky wheels get the grease. We've been getting better at being squeaky. Congratulations. We need to continue.
It's not just about access to critical services now. It's about opportunity for people, for employment, for education, for a future. And it only makes everyone's life better.
The only way this is going to be successful is if all the networks are connected, connecting all the communities. So that relationship is extremely important to the sustainability of the network.
And just a very brief final comment. We've talked a lot about the issues brought about by the lack of broadband in the last mile or the lack of affordable long haul back to exchange points. But think about the future challenges in an AI world if this network doesn't become, in the last mile sense, ubiquitous. That's an even greater challenge we face, and really points back to, in my view at least, the importance of a pragmatic approach to get this done and get this done in a timely way.
And thank you all for coming, and we'll see you in 2 years with lots of good news. And thank you to Scenic for really adopting me and really rooting for me and all of us who are in regional consortia. Without the support of all of you in this room, we'd be nowhere. Thanks.
Let's give a round of applause. Thank you.